Hey, welcome to this Next Level podcast from Freedom Church. It's great. My name's Dave, and I'm here with our senior pastor, Pastor G. Come on.
Hello.
Let's go. G, you've got five, grown-up sons. Your youngest son is not long. He's going to be getting married.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of grandkids now.
Yep.
There's a whole empire.
It's all happening. More to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on. Now, obviously, you sort of went through those early years of raising kids, in the 80s and the 90s? Is that it?
Yes, in the 80s.
Yeah.
86 was our first born.
Come on. Okay, so 86 was your first one. Here's the test. When was the last one? When was Sol? What year was he born?
He was born in 99.
Oh, come on. So you literally had, 13 years of the kind of having baby early stage of parenting.
Yes, constantly
in nappies.
Babies, and all the stuff that goes with it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And obviously since then, it was 86 you started, it's 2021. Oh my goodness. You've been a parent for like a long time. 35.
Yeah, I think Heather said she'd been going to the school gate for something like, obviously when they're older, you pick them up. They're not that small, but she'd been going to school for drop-offs for 30 years nearly.
Oh my goodness. And now, and it won't be long until the grandkids, and then you'll be back at the school gates. But gee, obviously like things change with time, with generations, like even just down to like technology, things like that. But what is different now in raising kids? What do you see is different now to when you were raising kids? And what of that do you think is good? And what of that do you think maybe we're going in the wrong direction? Yeah,
I think the huge one, maybe it's the most obvious, would be the screen age that we're in, that everything's about the screen, and you know, social media, entertainment, content. I mean, just sort of like 15 years ago, you wouldn't have seen what we have today. It's prolific. It's such a, and you have to recognize that this is a powerful influence, you know, over our children, in our world, over all of us. We didn't have that. So I would say it was definitely simpler.
Right.
It was simpler. I mean, when Josh, our youngest, I don't know, he was a teenager, and we got our first computer. And it was when you had those little floppy disks that hardly stored anything. And when you put it, you flicked it on. I had to wait 15 minutes for it to sort of really fire up and start. And it made loads of funny noises with the internet. And that didn't seem that long ago, and then you look today. So for us back then, I think raising kids was simpler. It was because with that screen age, there are so many things that, you get great content and knowledge, and, you know, you can access things. So you've got a greater view, but ultimately it brings in and draws in, I think, our children into a whole other challenge. And
what are some of those things that, because I mean, I totally agree. Like I'm right at the start, and I'm raising my kids in the screen age. Yeah. You know, what are some of those things you see this drawing our kids into that aren't healthy? Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a criticism, it's an observation. But we had 5 kids, and you're trying to have a conversation with someone, you might be after church and they're pulling at your leg and asking for this and that. It's hard work.
Right.
Today, I think you can use your phone and play them a nice little movie. You can sit your toddler on a little chair, and they're going to watch Peppa Pig or something like that.
Done this.
And I understand this, so please don't. I would do the same.
It's cool.
I would do the same. It's like it saves a lot of heartache, you know. But it's almost the balance of that, because once when you see young little babies, toddlers, they're experiencing this overload of.
Well, it is a drug.
Yeah, it's just feeding all of that. And then little ordinary things doesn't entertain them, because they need this high volume of their senses. Yeah. And if you think you're pouring that in from a very young age, and it's like constant and it's there all the time, then over the coming years, and as they become a teenager, can you imagine, you have really developed this appetite?
Well, I think, geez, like honestly, sorry to interrupt you. I don't even think, because I'm so conscious of this right now, we're not even developing an appetite, we're developing a reliance.
Yes.
Isn't it? Like that's where it's really dangerous.
Yeah. So you take away the screen from maybe the 5-year-old, and you can't do anything with them. That's, I think, when you've got to almost be checking. I really think those things are there to help you, but when you lose control of it and they start controlling you through the demand, and if that's at 5 years old, then
It's huge.
watch out when they're 12 years old, when they're you're going to be in trouble. And that's a huge pressure for parents, because
Right.
it's some way it's a easy solution, it's helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't control and lead your home and lead your
Right.
children in a healthy way of saying, no, that's enough, no, we're not always going to have a pattern, and when you demand it, we give you what you demand.
Right.
If you don't do that, you don't lead well, you're going to set yourself up for a lot of heartache. But not only that, you're setting up someone that is almost spoiled, because they have stuff on demand. And what
Yeah.
that produces is someone that life is, even some incredible things in life are just, okay, because they've seen everything. There's been a sensory
Right.
overload.
Right.
So we're going to go out and go for a walk on the mountains. Not interested, because I can look at the mountains on my screen.
Right.
And but it's not the same. But I'm not, that doesn't do anything for me. And I think going back, raising our kids, we had to get out. We had to go out and do
We had
stuff.
to get out.
We had to do, we were more creative.
Yeah.
Whereas
More
it's
inventive.
weird, because the screen allows this incredible creativity to come in, so we can just sit there and watch and switch off and become almost like couch potatoes with it. We can just observe and take part, rather than going to live that. And I think that's the challenge.
Have you seen the film Wall-E? It's like a Disney one. Like, you got grandkids, so I feel like it's the robot that gets left on Earth, and then
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've seen that, and
Yeah.
if you haven't seen, you go see it. But I don't know if you remember, but in the scene, so the robot goes up on the spaceship, and like all humanity's been on the spaceship for like a couple hundred years, right? And they're all sat on these hover moving chairs with screens, and they're all like,
Sounds fantastic.
I mean, it does, but they're all basically massively overweight, and they literally have never used their limbs. And then through the film, basically they get taken back to Earth, and it's this whole idea that these screens do have a blessing, but they actually can numb and even kill off parts of us, can't they?
Absolutely.
And I mean, I'm so aware of this. I like my kids are all under 10. We definitely use the screens. Like, on a long car journey, I'm like, thank you, Jesus, for screens. But me and Saz heard a really interesting statistic that said that of 3 study groups with kids, they took one set of kids and gave them no screen sensory exposure. They took another group of kids and gave them massive screen exposure. And then on the third group of kids, they gave them specifically allotted time of screen exposure. So in other words, it was like the one where it was like they just were massively overexposed. The TV was just left on, and the speaker and the phone overload the next. The group that had the best attention span wasn't group 1 with no screen, wasn't group 2 with all the screen. It was group 3 with controlled amounts of the screen.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's a great point, Dave. It's this discipline. And that's why I'm not criticizing it. I'm saying I understand it and I would do the same. But the balance is having this balance, because I think we can just give ourselves over. Once you're on it, you can just slip away. But if you have the discipline, it's this ability to be able to lead and say, no, you've had your allotted time, or you've had, that's enough, and this is what we've decided, and this is what we live by, and you control that, and you don't just allow them to do that in their room uncontrolled. Again, that's a massive one. Is just, it used to be when our boys were small, don't let them have a TV in their room.
Right. I mean, we're the same. That's how we are.
They got like 5 channels they could watch.
I know, 5.
Yeah. And now, and even then it was like, no, we didn't do that. We had TV in, the lounge, and we had that, and we did as a family, but it was controlled. We didn't allow that. We felt that was like a healthy thing. But now you've got this access through phones, through, different mediums to be able to sort of access stuff. And let's face it, some of it we've talked about is perhaps just healthy or entertainment that's, that's nice, and it's like pleasant, and isn't it fun? But then there's the sordid side, and the stuff that comes that is there to damage, and exposure of things that you wouldn't want your children to see. But somehow we can be naive, and I do come across parents that don't really know how it all operates. It's only till later on, and I hear these stories all the time, where parents are repairing, and they found out that their kids are struggling, who have now grown up, and perhaps they're young adults, but they're struggling with some addictions and some exposures of things that led them to make choices. Where did it start? When they were allowed to watch things in their room by themselves. They had access that was uncontrolled, not monitored, and it caused so much damage.
I mean, like, honestly, like, let's level about one of the most damaging one, pornography.
Yes.
The average age in the UK, so this is going to be worse in some nations and probably only marginally better in others, but the average age that a child is exposed to pornography now is between 10 and a half and 11. Like, that's the average.
Crazy.
So, like, if you think that spectrum might range to 13 or 14, it's coming down to, like...
And then the damage.
Exactly.
It's it's shocking. And, I want to shout out to the parents. You need to be having parental controls. You need to be saying no. And they might say you're the worst parent ever because all their friends at school, they're allowed to do whatever. No, you will. This will pay off in the future when they understand it. You need to have protection. You need to have like a little box where they put their phone before they go to bed. Even teenagers, guys. You might think, oh, well, I'm a teenager now and I'm 15 and I want to be independent. We know that people end up, they're still, having to make big decisions and just being alone at night in their bedroom, what they can access. I believe in those things. But as you said, Dave, it's not a thing of just completely closing the door on, we're not going to have any screen time and we're not going to watch movies. What's going to happen is you're going to suppress that. And when they get a chance, they're going to go wild.
And that's it, isn't it?
It is. It's that
such a
healthy measure of being able to say that's enough and get them to understand that's enough. That's your aim.
Yeah, and I think so many parents, like, I feel this pressure because the kids feel pressure. Because ultimately it's like, right now for us, it's TikTok, so my eldest daughter is like, everybody's talking about this and this. And, we're like, you're not going on TikTok because, there's some cute dances, but most of it, like I went on it once and I was like, I saw more skin than I've seen in a long time. I was like, I'm not putting that in front of my daughter right now because so much of it happens unintentionally. But the real pressure is you've got to have the backbone to say no.
Yeah.
As a parent, isn't it? We are not there. I'd love to ask you about this, but I think you'd agree with this. We are not there to appease their every want. That's not parenting, is it? It's we're there to steward them to a better life.
Yes.
Like, how do you say healthy no's as a parent? Because, you were saying you don't want to suppress it, you don't want to be insensitive, but at the same time, sometimes it is just no. How do you say healthy no's?
Yeah, obviously, when they're younger, if you're there trying to explain every no, they sometimes don't have the comprehension. But also sometimes if you've got several children, you haven't got time to sit down for 20 minutes to explain why you're saying no. They need to understand authority.
Yeah, come on.
And that's healthy authorities. If I say no, there's a good reason. You trust me. And that's what we learn with God. We don't always understand.
Right.
If he says no, you're not there saying, well, give me a good reason, God. Now, often we understand why, but sometimes we just know, let's be obedient first.
Right.
And I think there's something about this willingness that we need to build into our children by responding to no. If I say no, then that means no. And if I have chance to explain that to you, I will. But if we're always trying to explain our no's, they're going to grow up always expecting an explanation for every time they do something, and they won't agree with it unless they get an explanation.
Right.
That will cause them to have issues living life. Yeah. Because many things will happen in life you won't get an explanation. And I think it really does develop a spoiled child, because it's like, well, I need to be sat down and someone needs to understand me and I need an explanation. So it's a balance. Again, I really believe so much in this affirmation and explanation. Right. You're in trouble because of this, and this is what's going to happen. And we're going to take this away from you, or whatever. This is the consequence, and you walk them through that. But from it, you've got to realize that there's got to come this parent and child relationship, that you are leading them, you are responsible for them. Sometimes they won't always understand it, and they might think you're the most unfair, difficult parent ever, and they're angry and upset. Don't let that create fear in you as a parent. I think if you're basing all this in love, you say, this is because we love you, this is because we love you, it will come through. Have confidence, it will come through.
Yeah, and it comes down to vision, doesn't it? So it's actually, you're not saying no to be a killjoy or a spoil or to make them different to their mates. It's actually because you have a conviction, a vision of a better life that you're leading them to. And we're in that bit right now. We're talking about that quite a lot, where it's like, there's sometimes we just need to say no. And then there's other times we need to walk them through the journey of the why so that they own the no. I remember Chris and Karen, who are great leaders in our church, they said something to us when we just become parents. And they said this phrase that stuck with me so much. They said, rules without relationship equal rebellion.
Good.
Rules with relationship equal response.
Great wisdom.
Now, that doesn't mean you need to explain every no, but what it is that if you're only saying no and never spending time with them, never affirming them, never loving them, your no is going to be so much more painful. But if you have a relationship, it's that combination, isn't it?
Yes, and that's where people have experienced a lot of hurt through abuse of that authority, is when there hasn't been the relationship or the affirmation, but there's been strong discipline and like a distance, especially around fathers, where it's a disciplinary figure who is distant, never affirms, and never really says he loves them. It's like, wonder why someone ends up rebelling.
Right.
That's unhealthy discipline. It has to be immersed in this love and really unconditional love. Okay, you're going to make mistakes, but it's always going to be all right. We're always going to see it through. But there will be no's, and you need to learn no's, because it's actually going to build character into who you are.
So good. And, talking about character, you spoke recently in church about one of, I know, certainly our favorite Bible verses, where it talks about children being like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior. And you talked about how it's actually our job as parents. It's not actually about containing them. Sometimes, like with no's, we think, I'm containing them. Our actual job as parents is to get them ready and then release them. But that we've got this work to sow character into them. And you talked about the fact that if we lack wisdom as parents, we're not going to impart that to our kids. So how did you grow in wisdom as a parent, particularly in these early years? You said earlier, it was like sometimes like, I don't know what I'm doing. But how did you gain more wisdom? Because a lot of people think, it just happens. What do you do intentionally?
Always stepping back from situations and decisions that you make. Sometimes they won't be your best decisions, but always taking time to step back. And if you're married, you can do this together, where you evaluate not everything, not being intense about everything you do, but just periodically just look, how can we improve? Yeah. Okay, we had a meltdown. That was like, that didn't go to plan. I lost it. Something, then we started arguing. Okay, let's revisit it. So I think it's being bold to go and look at that and evaluate it. So evaluate is like, let's weigh it up. That's what evaluating is. Let's weigh it up. Let's look at it. Let's pull back, so we're not trying to defend our corner and what we didn't say, but say, how could we do that better? So it's always out of doing better, not out tearing down. Yeah. And I think within that, you recognize where you perhaps failed, but that's healthy. Healthy failure is learning. So, what can we learn from? Yeah, actually, that was a bit of a fail. And it was because of this, this, and this. And what you do is, next time, let's put this into play. So you learn from it and you take action. And then what you also do is you celebrate in the successes.
Come on, that's so key.
This is what some people don't do. They always look at where they got it wrong. But you've got to also say, that worked. Let's do more of what worked. Yeah. And let's try and learn from where that didn't quite work. And if you do that together, that is something about preparing the arrows. It's about, this is us stewarding well, that we can impart this wisdom through how we evaluate, put it into action, and always be ready to change and say, if there's a better way, we're up for it.
Yeah, and it's also not being insecure that if that better way you see because someone else is doing something better.
Yes.
It's like wisdom is learning from somebody else's mistakes, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
If I don't have to learn, if I don't have to go through the process, but I can learn because you went through the process, that's wisdom, isn't it?
Yes. I'd also say that we sometimes use the excuse that our kids are different to everyone else. We look and think, well, no one's got one of mine. We all have special little children. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's not many that you think they're a little model child. We have essential challenges around discipline, strong will, character. And if we're raising them, we're going to have strong characters with strong wills. That's what we believe God has entrusted to every individual. When you see someone who is perhaps, a grown-up man who is perhaps suppressed and he hasn't really got a lot to offer and there's not a lot going on, you can normally find that will be down to the parenting. Right. So when we do that, we're preparing the arrows. But let's not make excuses that our job and our task of our children is somehow a bit harder than others, because we excuse ourselves then. Because
you almost give yourself that excuse to not learn or get better at it. Yeah. Because you've got an exceptional circumstance.
Yeah, ours is exceptional. Ours is people don't understand. And that's why we don't like asking someone else, because they think, oh, but it works for your little angel.
Yeah.
but not, that wouldn't work for ours. But what we're immediately doing is pride.
Right.
We're withdrawing away, saying, "Oh, it's different for us. We don't know what they went through to get the little angel."
Now you're in a whole new phase of parenting. You're a grandparent now.
Yeah.
So, and I know
I have to remind myself.
I know you and H aren't,
and it's fantastic.
You're not the stereotypical grandparents.
They used to say this when we had little kids. Grandparents would say, "Great thing is that you can have lots of fun, spoil them, and then hand them back." And that's what we get chance to do now. It is true. You can actually have time with them. Do in a way you can let some things go. It doesn't really matter if they have another sweet and
or 7.
Yeah, you don't have to worry if they're going to sleep that night because you send them back.
Oh my goodness! And every parent, including me, has that seething feeling. No, but right, okay. So you're a grandparent. So here's, I guess, the question: has your learning stopped? I mean, you've raised your boys; they're now on to being dads. Have you? Because I think. Are you still intentional in trying to grow as a grandparent, or have you kind of how are you doing that?
I feel that we're still growing as parents.
Right.
So that isn't finished for us. I think we're still learning. We're still on that journey. And then we've got our grandchildren as well. And I'm a great believer that you don't just look at how your children have grown up and now they're young adults and haven't we done a great job? They're doing this and that. You see your parenting job, how well you've done when they start parenting.
Yeah.
Not when because it hasn't been tested. And how they parent is an effect of how you parented them.
Yeah,
that's how it comes out. And I think for us, though, it's different in the sense for our children that have their own children, our role changes. And one of the things that we're very aware of is we don't want to be interfering. We want to be a support. We want to be an encouragement. We want to lend and bring wisdom, but it's invited. We're so aware that you can see a different way of doing things, and we realize our way wasn't always the best way, and there's other ways, and different characters require different methods, etc. But we're learning all the time about that, and even watching our kids raise their kids, we're learning from them. And, we love that, to see that. But it is, I think, bringing input is always invited, and we're aware of that. We respect their space in that. We want to always be there to support. And one of the big things we do is pray.
Right.
We pray for them because we see the struggles. We see that stage they're going through, and we're thinking, oh, come on. So we pray and we encourage, and that is massive for any grandparent. I see too many grandparents sometimes forcing their ways and their opinions and some of their failures onto their own kids. Well, you'll learn and all this. And I think that's so unhelpful.
Just talking about that and thinking about that, we're talking about this idea of arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior you release. But that thing you're saying about grandparents almost asserting, it's like they grab the arrow back in flight because you want to control it again. What's, like you were saying there, okay, we wait for an invitation, we pray. Is there anything else that you would speak to grandparents, giving wisdom to them about when to speak up, when not to? Is there anything you've seen that's definitely don't do that, or definitely do this?
Yeah, you've got to release them. You've got to empower them to make the decisions and go on the journey. We sometimes, as grandparents, want to shortcut some of the pain. So you can see sometimes, well, if you carry on doing that, it's not the best thing. But sometimes you have to allow them to walk the walk, because in walking is when you discover and you mature. You can't always say, let's skip 6 spaces. There are some things that you can bring wisdom and it saves pain, but there are also some things in parenting and learning that your children are going to need to learn, and you just need to be a great cheerleader on the side.
Right.
Because you can't try and shortcut it. So that's really important. But then there are key things in your kids that if you see they're not having time within their marriage and it's all around their, the kids, and they've somehow forgotten each other and they're not prioritizing, I would speak to my kids and say, I've got concerns here. Can we, and perhaps how can we help with that? Can we have the kids for a night? Exactly. Offer a solution. Maybe it's about, being just part of God's house and the church and just making that a priority. I wouldn't stand back, even though they've now left and they've, they've done, because those are things as a parent that I'm responsible for their spiritual well-being. I'm not going to stand by if someone is on the edge of danger. I'm going to speak in, but we do it from a place of relationship. And if we haven't got that relationship and the way that we've invested, it's not going to be received well.
And I think if you're a grandparent, if you're a grandparent and we're talking about speaking to your kids, not your grandkids, if you do that better, they'll invite it in more, won't they?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's so important how you relate in this way, and even sharing and doing it in a way of not criticism, because it can come over so well as, oh, you're getting that wrong and you should be doing this. The art of communication in all of this for grandparents, just because they're your kids and you raise them, doesn't give you the right to be careless with your communication. Because often you have a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law, who's also involved, and what can happen is they can be pushed further away. And I think it's almost having that respect and honor in the way that we treat, and relate to one another is going to help us.
And I think, and encouragement.
Oh,
it's
massive.
Like, I know there's one particular parent in our set of parents is really like great at encouraging. Like they just, you're doing a great job, right? And they're not going, you're doing a perfect job. They're
and doesn't it go a long way?
It goes so far. It goes so far. It's like, oh, you told me what I want to hear, so I want to hear more from you. It's no, you've got our best intentions at heart. I am more open to hear from you.
Definitely.
I am, and so I just think it can be that balance. So you can't shortcut the pain. Sometimes you've got to let them walk through the thing, and let them not solve it the 6 times,
yes.
But there are certain things, there's certain lines that you have to know you are still responsible. Speak in from a place of relationship. And ultimately, the better you do it, the greater an invitation you're going to have.
Amen.
Come on. It's so good. Love it. Thank you so much to you and H for sharing your wisdom. Let's go get crafting these arrows and release them to the target.